This is IAQradio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your host, Radio Joe Hughes, and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQradio Plus. And we're back in the studio this week after a couple weeks on the road. Looking forward to interview with Nick Hurst from the US EPA's Indoor airPLUS program. This week is episode number 509. If you get a chance, go to our Facebook page and like us, or the YouTube page, and you can subscribe there, comment, and you can also sign up for the weekly show announcement at IAQradio.com. And you can download the podcast through Podbean, BEAN.com, or iTunes. And don't forget, we have those continuing education credits available. Send me an email at joe.hughes@iaqtraining.com. We'll get you set up with the continuing education program. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors.
IAQradio Platinum sponsor is John Don Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at jondon.com. That's JONDON.com. Gold sponsors are Particles Plus Engineers and Manufacturers of feature-rich particle counters and air quality monitoring instrumentation. Learn more at particlesplus.com. Count on us. Healthy Indoors Magazine, a free online digital magazine for industry professionals and consumers. Subscriptions available at healthyindoors.com. And AEML Laboratories, free FedEx shipping, great pricing, same-day results, and never a rush fee. Learn more at AEMLinc.com. Association sponsors are the Indoor Air Quality Association, a multidisciplinary organization dedicated to promoting the exchange of indoor environmental information through education and research. Learn more at IAQA.org. And RIA, the Restoration Industry Association, the granddaddy of the restoration industry. Network with leaders. Learn more at restorationindustry.org.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick@cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man with this week's IAQ Radio Trivia question.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations to Susan Valenti, IAQ Media in Boston, Massachusetts, for being first to correctly answer last week's trivia question, identifying 8 as the number of professors that the University of Texas Austin had when it first opened. The IAQ Radio Trivia question for today, Friday, June 29, 2018, has been sponsored by Ideas, the solution chemistry company, creating unique solutions to odor removal, surface cleaning, and decontamination problems. Here is today's trivia question. Name the EPA administrator who later went on to become director of the FBI. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Cliff. Hey, before we get Nick on, I've got 2 quick industry updates. One is that the Phil Morey Scholarship Fund is going to be the matching from Don Weeks and Lan Chi. They're going to continue to match funds up till July 31st, so we'll put the link in the blog, and maybe we can get John to put that up in the chat box when we get a chance here. The other is that Jay State was very recently elected as the new IAQA president, a sponsor of the show. We want to congratulate Jay and look forward to working with him as time goes on. So today's show, we've got Nick Hurst. Nick is an environmental protection specialist with the US EPA, and he's the program manager of EPA's Indoor airPLUS label for new homes. He's been involved in the construction industry for over 17 years as a self-employed remodeling contractor, project manager, green building consultant, and trainer. He's got a master's in technology, concentrating in building science from Appalachian State in Boone, North Carolina. And he later served as education and outreach director for the North Carolina Energy Efficiency Alliance at ASU's Energy Center. Before coming to EPA, he also worked as a consultant at ICF in their federal energy efficiency portfolio. He's a BPI Building Analyst and participates in a number of standard-setting organizations and technical committees. We're thrilled to have you on the show, Nick. Welcome to IAQ Radio.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Cliff. Appreciate you having me. Thanks for the invitation.
You know, it's great to have our friends from EPA's Indoor Environments Division join us here, and looking forward to an update on the Indoor airPLUS program. I've been promoting that program for years, and I want to get a little more detail for listeners today. So can you first tell listeners a little more about yourself and your role with the Indoor airPLUS program?
Sure. Yeah, you gave me a great introduction to begin with. But I've been in the construction industry most of my life. Kind of grew up doing it. It's kind of in my blood. My dad was a remodeler when I was young, and some of my uncles were also builders and developers. So I helped my dad build our first house when I was 10 years old. He taught me quite a bit and learned from my uncles doing framing and stuff in southeastern Pennsylvania. Probably learned some bad habits, probably learned a lot of good habits too. Back then, the idea of advanced framing, I don't know if that term was around then, but for us, it was probably how fast could you get that wall, studded up, sheathed, and stood up, before morning break. So that's kind of where I come from, was just hammering nails. And then, eventually I came to your neck of the woods in the Pittsburgh area and did remodeling for about 5 years on my own. So remodeling is even more of a passion for me to some degree than the new construction. But I'm running the Indoor airPLUS program right now at EPA, which is focused currently on new homes, and I'll talk a little bit later about how that may be transitioning in the near future. But eventually got into building science and wanted to kind of learn the specifics of how buildings really work, and that led me to understand, learn about Energy Star and get connected with people in the industry, who were really kind of pushing the envelope, so to speak, and ultimately ended up here at EPA when the previous program manager, Bob Axelrad, retired close to 2 years ago. So, I haven't been here that long, but I've been in and around the building industry and the green building realm for a number of years.
Well, let's go to the program itself just for a moment here. What's the intent of the program? Is there a label or some other form of recognition for, and this is new homes right now, and we'll talk about hopefully someday it will also be something that existing homes can use, but let's talk about the intent right now.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the primary intents of the program is to give builders technical guidance, of course, and give them a tool to take the next step from just building a kind of conventional code-built home, or maybe even a better than code, an energy efficient home, to building a home that really includes indoor air quality as a focus and add health protections for the occupants as well. Of course, the builder can only go so far in delivering a product that's designed for a healthier indoor environment. It's still up to the homeowner to play their part in maintenance, long-term operation and lifestyle, cleanliness, the purchasing habits that they have. These are all factors too, but we can come back to that. But it's really to set up the homeowner for success in their home. But secondly, second intent is it gives those builder partners that we have an opportunity to really market themselves in a different way too. So builders are always looking for, that edge above their competitors. And with an EPA partnership program and a labeling program, they have something more solid to stand on as they're trying to, sell this to home buyers. There's still a lot of builders that create their own kind of marketing brand and a proprietary program, whether it's around just quality or customer service or energy efficiency or health, et cetera. But with Indoor airPLUS, they have a government-backed label, and they can sell because they followed a set of best practices that are based on building science and kind of what we talk about as house as a system. And they have these practices verified as well by a third-party home energy rater throughout the construction process. So from our standpoint, it's a public-private partnership that's really a win-win for government and industry. We don't have any regulatory authority here in the Indoor Environments Division at EPA to mandate, specific levels of contaminants in the air, but in the indoor air anyway, but we can force and we can't force a builder to, take any specific steps, but we can kind of give them the carrot at the end of the stick and create and disseminate guidance about public health and health risks, and then ultimately use non-regulatory voluntary programs like Indoor airPLUS to achieve some of those goals.
And Energy Star itself is also a voluntary program, but that's kind of the foundation, right? So you've got to be Energy Star first, and then on top of that, you would do the additional things we've got up on the, or follow the additional recommendations we have up on the slide right now to become an EPA Indoor airPLUS qualified home.
You got it. Yep. And Energy Star's got a great foundation when it comes to energy efficiency in the building envelope. They have good requirements for HVAC and even some moisture control elements, some of which are completely parallel and in line with our Indoor airPLUS requirements. And then our Indoor airPLUS goes a little bit further in some of those areas in terms of moisture and HVAC, and then add some non-energy components like radon and pest prevention, and then a selection of materials that go into the building, low emission materials. So we're giving, not only an energy efficiency package, but and a comprehensive kind of indoor air quality package. And ultimately that last item there, a safer, healthier home is what we try to communicate, from builders to homeowners.
And, we have had, actually, we had, I guess the originator of, the Energy Star program on a few times, Sam Rashkin, once when he was at EPA, and then again a couple times when he was moved over to the Department of Energy. And when we talk about acceptance of the program, I believe the last time we talked, he was saying that, and don't quote me on this, you can get me better numbers, but almost 15% or more of the new home construction at the time looked like it was going to be Energy Star. Do you know where we're at on that now?
Yeah, that's a pretty close estimate. Now, I don't know the specific number. I know it was up in the 20s at some point. Housing decline probably contributed to some fall off in those numbers, and some of the substantial recommendations and updates they included with Energy Star version 3. Created some challenges for builders, but also pushed builders in a really positive direction too. Now I think it's in the teens in terms of market uptake of all new construction for Energy Star, which is great.
Yes, it is. That's a big jump. From where they first started, it was a very cost-effective program, as I understand it too. EPA didn't spend all that much money putting together the original Energy Star, as I understand it. Anyhow, let's talk a little bit about how the program got started and how it fits into the context of other programs and standards in the markets. You've got LEED program, you've got the National Association of Home Builders and others. Give us a little background on this. Okay.
So the Indoor airPLUS was, started around 2009. It was actually kind of kicked off as the Energy Star Indoor Air Package, and then it grew into a program with its own specifications and partnerships. And again, it's got that home label and third-party verification that goes along with it. And we do actually a quarterly reporting process with in sync with the Energy Star Certified Homes program. So we kind of have a pretty good sense of how many homes are labeled in the market from home energy raters and providers. And so over the first, 5 years, it was kind of a slow growth, in part because it came out, right at the housing downturn in the market. But the program did a revision in 2013 and a couple subsequent revisions after that. But, one of the, primary intents here is to engage with the marketplace and figure out what's working, what's not. And so we talk with builders and home energy raters and figure out what those challenges are and what those barriers are, and try to create alternative solutions for them as well. So then when we see, emerging building science happening and technological advances, we'll make tweaks to the specifications. Same process for Energy Star as well. So some things simplified with the Indoor airPLUS checklist in 2013. And we've seen a really nice uptick in the last few years, I think in large part because there's this growing focus on health in homes. And, that's great. Just this past February, we released revision 4 of the specs. Again, similar updates and tweaks to the specifications with some additional exceptions and kind of alternative pathways. We can talk about dehumidification in crawl spaces later. One of the other things that's changing is the radon industry is updating some of their standards. Currently, the ARST consortium is one who's has a primary focus on radon standards, and so we're starting to reference those, not necessarily requiring those standards to a T, but trying to steer builders towards understanding them and including those best practices in their construction of indoor airPLUS homes. So those are some of the high-level changes.
You mentioned quarterly checkup on the. Is anybody actually taking measurements in these homes to see what kind of effect some of these changes are having on, say, radon levels or whatever other, particulate or VOCs? How do you handle that?
Well, I think there are some builders who are kind of trying to be proactive about that. I think, before the show, you were talking about low-cost monitors that are, proliferating in the industry, and there's still some challenges, of course, with those in terms of maybe accuracy and long-term, integrity. But yeah, that's growing as an interest area. We are not taking measurements at Indoor airPLUS. We are actively engaged with the Department of Energy on a number of different items. One being their work in the indoor air quality arena and surrounding a baseline study that they're just about to kick off to kind of assess what homes, are how their indoor air quality is, both code-built homes and homes that have, kind of above code ventilation, and maybe even those homes that meet passive house standards. So there's not going to be huge samples, but there's going to be a lot of great data that comes from those homes over the next couple of years. So we're looking forward to that.
Who was doing that again?
Department of Energy.
DOE. Okay. Interesting.
Yep.
Will be very interesting to see. All right. Well, let's go to the next topic here. We're basically looking at an approach of creating a healthier home. So what goes into that, and how do you discuss that with the public?
Well, great question. So, there's kind of three primary strategies that we have to create, to reduce health risks and create a healthier home. One is source control. That's probably the predominant one. So we're, really trying to reduce or eliminate, the contaminants that could be coming into the home, trying to keep them out from the beginning. And you'll see that in a minute in the specs themselves when we talk about that. But ventilation and filtration are then two other ones. So ventilation is, of course, diluting the air, and filtration is, trying to remove what's left through a filter mechanism. But you can't do that for all contaminants. But particulate matter (PM) is kind of the primary one. So yeah, when you look at the 7 sections of Indoor airPLUS, you can start like at moisture control, radon, and pests. Those are all kind of source control areas where we're trying to keep those sources of contaminants out. Combustion pollutants and low emission materials is another source control strategy. Try and keep those contaminants out. And then HVAC systems deals a little bit more with the latter two strategies, right? Ventilation and filtration. And then we have a section as well on home commissioning, which is a little bit about ventilation and filtration as well, but it's also largely about homeowner education. So that kind of gives a high level look at our strategy. Now, one thing I also want to mention, Joe, is when we try to communicate with the public, which you asked about, we try to make sure builders, don't go so far in communicating about Indoor airPLUS that they make implicit guarantees to home buyers. Because of course, we can set the home buyer up for success, creating a safer home, a healthier home. But just because we have what we call a quote unquote healthy home doesn't mean that their homeowners are never going to get sick, or that they're going to, cure some disease or ailment that they might have. But it really is about, putting the best building science, foot forward and giving them the tools and resources, to offer to the home buyer.
Well, or that it's going to stay healthy if they don't properly maintain it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you've got that's got to be a tough one, because you're adding certain components like, ventilation, and that ventilation needs to be maintained. So it's an interesting kind of balancing act, I would imagine, that you have to work through.
It is a challenge, especially when the transaction process. At the time of sale is is when the keys turn over, and it's really up to the homeowner to kind of take the baton from there. But if the builder is proactive, hopefully they can give them some resources and a package of guidance to pass along that can help them maintain a healthier indoor environment in the long run.
That package of guidance, I think, is something that a lot of builders are slowly, putting in the hands of their customers. So it's like, you get a new car and you get this big book on how to operate your new car and maintain your new car. I know when I bought any of the homes I bought, I didn't get any guidance on how to maintain my home. How do you handle that? Is that left up to the contractor or the builders to ensure that the homeowner has some kind of operating manual?
It is. In our requirements right now, we require them to deliver like this package to the homeowner that mostly includes the instruction manuals for any, equipment in the home and anything that's related to the indoor air quality of the home. So maybe the radon system, right, or the HVAC filtration system. But what we're also working on right now is some more standard language that they can use to communicate a little bit more about those, manuals and resources. Because like you said, you get a manual for your car or something. How many people really read through the entire manual? Very few of us. But we're trying to work on some canned language that we can offer as a more explicit homeowner education package for builders.
All right. Well, let's go now and walk through some of the major elements of the actual Indoor airPLUS specifications. What are some of the steps that a builder is required to take in terms of, let's start with moisture control?
Sure. One of the great things about moisture control is what Energy Star, when they transitioned to version 3, they instituted a water management checklist, water management requirements now for the builder that are kind of baked into actually their partnership agreement. And so some of these are kind of common sense, sloping final grades away from the foundation. But yet still we see, lots of new homes being built where things weren't done quite properly and they end up with foundation drainage issues, near and around the home. Installing drain tiles at the footings of basements and crawl space walls, again, common sense. Energy Star has built it into their checklists. One thing that Indoor airPLUS goes beyond that is to add a drain or a sump pump in basements or crawl spaces, and that's primarily to handle, water, underground water and potentially mitigate issues that might happen in the basement itself from surface water from a pipe burst or something like that.
Okay.
Another one. Go ahead.
Got the slide up on the basement slab with a capillary break.
Yeah, so that's another really important feature. The capillary break is, 6 mil, at least a 6 mil minimum vapor retarder that's, put down before the concrete slab is poured. And then in addition, we require a 4-inch layer of clean aggregate underneath that. Now there's some exceptions to that, like in dry climates, for example, or slab on grade homes. All of these specifications for both Energy Star and Indoor airPLUS are climate zone specific and radon zone specific. The one thing that this capillary break requirement that you see here helps with is not only moisture that's pushing up, through the slab and potentially creating humidity issues in the basement, but also it sets you up for radon mitigation if needed later. And we can talk about that one next. But sealing those slab edge walls to the foundation wall is important. Sealing any penetrations that come through the slab is also important.
Okay, let's go to the next one. So, all right, tell us a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is more moisture requirements, foundation walls, basements and crawl spaces. Most everyone, I think these days is doing damp proofing at minimum on their exterior foundation walls. It's an Energy Star requirement too. Indoor airPLUS adds a requirement for a sealed and insulated and conditioned crawl space or basement. So, not all builders are doing that. Some builders still just kind of throw some poly on the floor in the crawl space and call it done. But we rarely require them to seal, insulate, and condition it. Now, we've also seen, again, there's some exceptions to that. We've also seen really high quality basements and crawl spaces that haven't necessarily used conditioned air in them, but they've done dehumidification. So we've just, in the last year, we've allowed an exception for this particular requirement for the conditioned air to allow them to do dehumidification in that type of crawl space. As long as they're still doing a capillary break on the floor, it's got to be well sealed, sealed to the piers, sealed to the foundation walls, not just staked in place. And of course, we want the dehumidifier to also be drained. We don't want to have to, require the homeowner to go down there and empty a bucket, every day.
One of the questions I get what about the sizing of the dehumidifier? Is there any guidance on that, or is that left up to the builder?
It is left up to the builder currently, and we've been considering whether or not to add additional guidance on sizing and even quality specs for the dehumidifier. We haven't landed on those yet. We still want to engage with industry a little bit about that and figure out what's reasonable and practical. At this point, we're just trying to encourage active dehumidification as a start.
Yeah, it's a start. It's a good start, actually. All right, let's go to the radon section here, 2.1. We've got our radon controls. Let's walk listeners through this slide right here. We've got the sub-slab depressurization here. Is this, and keep in mind, listeners, this is for new construction. So go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so for Indoor airPLUS to earn the label, if you're building in Radon Zone 1, we require at least a passive radon system. And that term, passive or active is, an active system has a fan attached to it, which actively, draws air from under the slab. That term passive is kind of the radon standards industry is moving a little bit more towards the idea of a radon rough-in rather than a passive system, because a passive system can go so far, to reduce risks of radon in the home. But there's obviously it's a lot more effective with an active system. So that terminology is changing a little bit. But really starts under the slab is creating that soil gas collection area, and a pipe and a T-fitting and a simple 3 or 4 inch pipe going out the roof. It's very simple and cost effective to install on the front end. So we are encouraging that in all radon zones, but it's required in Radon Zone 1. And again, also a receptacle in the attic, because if we ever do need to make it an active system, if the homeowner tests and they're high, they have high radon levels, we want them to be able to easily get an active system installed.
Nick, how close is this to the most current code requirements for new construction? If you know off the top of your
Good question. I don't know for sure. Appendix F of the IRC has some basic requirements that are okay. I think we're a little bit more explicit in our Indoor airPLUS requirements, and certainly the radon standards. The CCAH standard, which is that passive system or rough-in system standard, is much more explicit about the requirements that go into to this type of system. So code's coming along, maybe not as quickly as we would all like it, but it's getting there.
I also noticed you've got a polyurethane caulk ceiling at the floor wall joint, and that's been kind of highlighted throughout here. I'm wondering if you have any recommendation on the type. Just polyurethane, I guess, is the type of caulk or ceiling that you want.
Yeah, there is a specific ASTM standard that I don't have off the top of my head, but I think we do include it in our specs. And if it's not in our spec, it's in the radon standards themselves. So yeah, you don't just want any old caulk. But the reason for that is, your active radon system is going to be a lot more effective if it's not sucking conditioned air from your crawl space or basement, but if it's actually pulling as best it can against that soil gas collection plenum. So we want to do the best we can to seal all those joints and seams and penetrations in the slab.
And then I just wanted to finish the radon, then we're going to go to halftime. This detail here gives us a little more on the on the passive versus the, well, no, these are both looking like active to me. Nick, can you comment on these?
Yeah, well, we get questions from time to time, not regularly, but how can I do an indoor airPLUS home with a gut rehab? You can earn the label if you do a gut rehab, because you can follow the Energy Star requirements and earn both labels. But it's obviously hard when you have an existing slab there and we don't know what's under it, depending on how old the home was, if it's been prepared properly. So we've given basically an alternative pathway for gut rehabs to earn the label. If they're in radon zone 1, then they just have to do an active system and do a test out upon final inspection. So that kind of helps ease our mind a little bit about what was underneath the slab to begin with, and doesn't add a substantial amount of cost for the remodeler. When you're doing a gut rehab, obviously there's a lot of other costs you're incurring anyway. So this is a pretty light lift, we think.
Interesting. All right. We're going to stop and thank our sponsors. We'll be back for the second half of our interview. We've got Nick Hurst from the EPA Indoor Air Program, or Indoor Environments Division, Indoor airPLUS Program Manager. We'll be right back.
IAQradio Platinum sponsor is John Don Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at jondon.com. That's JONDON.com. Gold sponsors are Particles Plus engineers and manufacturers of feature-rich particle counters and air quality monitoring instrumentation. Learn more at particlesplus.com. Count on us. Healthy Indoors Magazine, a free online digital magazine for industry professionals and consumers. Subscriptions available at healthyindoors.com. And AEML Laboratories, free FedEx shipping, great pricing, same-day results, and never a rush fee. Learn more at AEMLinc.com. Association sponsors are the Indoor Air Quality Association, a multidisciplinary organization dedicated to promoting the exchange of indoor environmental information through education and research. Learn more at IAQA.org. And RIA, the Restoration Industry Association, the granddaddy of the restoration industry. Network with leaders. Learn more at restorationindustry.org.
And please be sure to thank our sponsors when you inquire about their services or products. Let's get back with Nick Hurst. We're going to go into this is kind of perfect, Nick. We've broken. Now we're going to come back to the big daddy of the IAQ plus Indoor Air Quality plus the HVAC system. Let's talk a little bit about the HVAC system and Indoor Air Plus. Although actually I think maybe was the pests first, Nick. Which one do you want to go to?
Either one. We can. Looks like you have pests up. We can talk briefly about those.
And it looks like your primary concern is keeping them out in the first place.
Yeah, it's pretty common sense as well, right? I mean, we don't have a substantial pest requirements. When you're doing an Energy Star home, you're doing a lot of air sealing anyway, and limiting a lot of the pathways pests can get into. If you do have large gaps that need to be caulked or sealed, we always recommend using kind of like some type of wire mesh or something behind those. Try to keep out rodents in the long run who might be able to burrow through that caulk down the road. But our really only primary requirement is to use a corrosion-proof bird screen or rodent screen on any of those openings that can't be sealed or caulked. So trying to keep those pests out of chimneys and out of your mechanical systems.
Makes sense. Let's go to the next one. Now we're talking about HVAC, and we've got sizing and design, and I kind of like your homes in warm, humid climates line here. It's not quite the same as the chart here. Tell listeners a little bit about how you came up with this.
Well, it's not something that we came up with. It is the hot, humid climate designation by the IECC. So it's really applies down there in the southeast. Not just climate zone 2, but it has that little bit of zone 3 in it as well. So our primary intent here, aside from proper HVAC sizing and design, using ACA Manual J, D, S, or using ASHRAE handbook, is to try to promote dehumidification in those climate zones. And really in the long run down the road, we may want to be promoting dehumidification in even above that line in other places. We haven't figured out exactly where to land on that yet, but as we build homes tighter and tighter, it's latent loads from inside the home can be troublesome and challenging to deal with. So in addition to the substantial ventilation load that you get, in those southeastern climates and in some others, up the eastern seaboard.
I live in the mountains of Pennsylvania here between Pittsburgh and Harrisburg, and my dehumidifier has not stopped running since would have been April, nonstop. I try and keep it below 55, and I'm just really surprised at how these swing seasons, it's really tough to keep it below 55%. And, I suspect someday you'll be moving that line way up, but we'll see as time goes on, Nick. Let's go to the next slide there, John. All right. Want to tell us a little bit about this section from the Indoor airPLUS program?
Sure. Again, I mentioned ACCO Manual JDS. ACCO Manual D kind of helps the designer design the duct system, and so that's built into the Energy Star requirements now, which is great. And making sure that they're airtight, properly balanced. You see a picture there of sealing the duct with mastic, which is our preferred way to do it.
Yep.
But then Indoor airPLUS, also requires that we don't use any building cavities as part of the forced air supply system or the return system. There's still a lot of builders who are using returns in joist cavities and wall cavities. We're trying to steer them away from that practice. And then covering duct openings during construction, or at least substantially vacuuming them out prior to installing the registers. You see an example there of a contractor who put his boot in and then put the piece of plywood right back on the floor and masked it down, which is a really nice, simple, effective way to kind of cover things during construction. We know that the builder can't necessarily keep them covered forever throughout construction, because they got to sometimes condition the home, right?
Sure.
To kind of take the humidity out of the home. So that's why we also allow them to vacuum them out after construction.
After construction. Let's go to the next one, John. Okay, here we've got a little more on ventilation, whole house ventilation. And this is a really big topic here and an important topic. So tell us a little bit about this particular slide, Nick.
Well, we're requiring ASHRAE 62.2 for whole house ventilation. I think a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with that. This is just a basic picture on the left there of how you might achieve that through exhaust ventilation and the timered control, with a bath fan and a timer. The picture on the right shows instead of an exhaust ventilation, a positively pressurized ventilation strategy. You have ducted fresh air coming into the home. The nice thing about that one is you can filter that oftentimes, and potentially use a damper, and maybe not even use the central air handler itself to provide that ventilation. That's the ideal. And then of course there's a balanced ventilation system, which is even better, through an ERV or HRV. And we don't require or mandate any specific one of those, but we want to meet ASHRAE 62.2.
I'm just curious, is there any push toward more focus on a balanced system with, that seems to be, I don't know, the preferred method for a lot of the building science gurus out there. I'm wondering what's been happening in the EPA program with respect to that.
Well, we haven't yet, made strong recommendations or requirements around balanced ventilation. But yeah, I think it's kind of known throughout the industry that that's probably the ideal approach. And I think even ASHRAE 62.2, there have been proposals to reduce, the requirement for ventilation if balanced ventilation is used. I think that committee just met this past week, and so I'm sure we'll be hearing more. Maybe in one of your upcoming shows, you can have somebody on the committee talk about that discussion from their standpoint. But it's certainly important to us at EPA, and we're watching it closely.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We may have to get Paul Francisco or somebody back. We had Paul probably about a year and a half ago now, so that's a great idea to follow up on that. I noticed that Allison Bales had a new blog out today, and we'll get folks that information in the blog. But he was going over some of the discussion at the most recent meeting on that particular issue. Let's go to filtration, Nick. This is a very important issue for listeners. Tell us a little bit about the filtration recommendations for Indoor airPLUS.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we just added in revision 4 is an advisory to filter outdoor air, filter incoming air if you do have one of those, positively pressurized systems or a balanced system. And really, we'd love for it to be MERV 13 or higher. That's not always achievable depending on your equipment, but we know that outdoor air is generally better than indoor air, but depending where you live, depending what's happening around your home, you may still have substantial particulate matter coming into the home, and it's important to filter it as a source control strategy, right out of the gate. And there's MERV, as you can see that in that chart, MERV 14 is when you start getting up in like the 75 to 80% kind of removal efficiency area, and with Energy Star and I think actually 62 too, we're still back at MERV 6, and that's for essential ventilation system. But MERV 8 is what Indoor airPLUS requires on a central ventilation system, HVAC system. But we are again recommending that you filter not only the recirculating airstream, but the exterior incoming air as well.
So this particular slide goes over I guess it's the Energy Star requirements, and then installing only an HVAC filter MERV 8 or higher, like you said. The second one's interesting. Do not install any air cleaning equipment designed to produce ozone. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's too common actually to have substantial ozone generation. There are some types of electrostatic filters and things that may produce fractional amounts of ozone, which generally are not all that troublesome to health and to those with respiratory issues. But ozone can be a substantial, aggravator for respiratory issues. So we don't want any air cleaners that are like ozonators, right, that are producing ozone. And we want to use also a filter in the air handling unit during construction, and then also a clean one upon final inspection. But one of the other important pieces of higher MERV filters is making sure that you don't stick in a high MERV filter without accounting for it in the total design of the HVAC system. So, if you have a wider filter rather than a pleated MERV 8 filter, you might actually have better airflow across the filter and throughout the entire system without hurting your air handler so much and really reducing your mix throughout the home.
Okay, let's move on to combustion equipment, a very important indoor air quality topic. Why don't we talk a little bit about this slide, Nick?
Yeah, there's so much to go into with combustion equipment, but the long and short of it is we want to mechanically draft or direct vent, any gas or oil-fired furnaces or boilers. There's exceptions to that in climate zones 1 to 3, where it's still somewhat common there. So if you do a CAS test that's permitted. Fireplaces should be mechanically drafted or direct vented. Those are actually Energy Star requirements, which is great. Okay. We also require not installing any combustion space heating or decorative appliances within conditioned space that are unvented. So again, another important combustion safety issue. And then if there's homeowners that are doing other types of wood burning stoves or pellet stoves, wood burning fireplaces, there's some emission standards and restrictions for those that we require as well. And those are fairly well detailed in our specs.
Okay, and here we've got a little more detail on. Let's see what we've got. Attics and garages. Let's talk a little bit about this section.
Yeah, so combustion pollutants, it's not just about, direct venting or mechanically drafted equipment. It's also about where are there combustion pollutants, right beside the home if you have an attached garage. So, we require kind of two strategies here. One is just isolating that garage from your conditioned space, and air sealing goes a long way. Weather stripping the door, and we include a requirement for an automatic door closer on any connecting doors between the garage and the living space, so that if somebody does start the car and it's running for a while and the kids are running in and out of the home, hopefully the door is closing and not filling the home with auto exhaust. But the second one, which is equally important, is a ventilation strategy or some type of pressure testing to ensure that the home is actually substantially air sealed. So we used to require a garage fan in the garage, and that's very common in commercial garages, right? But not so common in residences. So a lot of builders were saying, I really don't know how to sell that to my home buyer. That's an additional cost, additional challenge for me, to install that. Are there any other alternatives? So we now allow in homes that use a negative pressure ventilation system. So again, going back to that bath fan on a timer, if they're using that to meet ASHRAE 62.2, there's a good chance they might be sucking garage pollutants into the home, right? Because they're exhausting the home regularly. So in those cases, we want the home energy rater to do basically a zonal pressure test across the door from the garage to the house to make sure that they have substantially air sealed that home. If it doesn't pass that zonal pressure test, there's got to be some more air sealing that needs to be done on that garage interface, or a garage fan put in.
It's interesting. I noticed a couple articles recently. I think it was from the New York Times or maybe others, that more people were dying from carbon monoxide coming from cars running in garages because they've got the automatic start now, and it looks like you're kind of taking that into consideration here too. Plus, we have tighter homes, and those carbon monoxide, those combustion pollutants don't have a way to get out. So, very interesting. Let's go to the next topic right here. We've got 24. Okay, this one's fascinating to me. I'm getting ready to put in some new carpet, and I don't have a lot of carpet in the house, but with a slab on grade and a cold climate, a little carpet here and there can be quite nice on your feet in the wintertime. And I was trying to figure out, okay, what's the best label? It looks like you guys have chosen the CRI green label. Can you tell listeners a little more about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's right. The CRI green label or Green Label Plus is for carpet and carpet adhesives. And that's what we try to do with this section is identify what standards and third-party labels kind of are available in the market for materials that are low emitting. And there's three primary requirements. Carpet is one of them, and then composite wood and interior paints are the others. And those have been in there since the beginning of the program. We have some additional advisories that weren't originally included for both adhesives and sealants and for hard surface flooring. So with our process of spec updates, we try to signal to the industry and to our partners what changes might be coming down the road. It's very likely that in version 2 of our program, we will have low emission material requirements for those adhesives and hard surface flooring. Fortunately, they're becoming more available in the market now, so it's not a big lift for builders. But composite woods and interior paints, there's a lot of low VOC, quote unquote low VOC interior paints. We're trying to steer folks towards ones that are third party labeled. And there's also a couple different methods towards achieving what's called a low emission material. One is low emission by low VOC by content or by weight. And so that's like the amount of VOCs that you measure sort of by weight in the material. The other is what's actually coming out of the material, right? What's being emitted. And we don't recommend one or the other. We have a number of different third-party labels that we suggest that are appropriate for these homes. But I think we're moving towards a place where we're seeing what we want to be able to measure what's coming out of the product even more substantially than what's going into it. So that might be a shift that's happening in the future.
And it's probably a pretty big shift for the builders and the energy raters that you use to help you with the program. They're used to dealing with energy and air tightness and so on. And well, when you tighten it up, then you've got to be even more concerned about these emitting materials. Have you had good buy-in from your group on this?
Yeah, a few years back, we had a lot of questions from builders and raters about how do I find these? I don't quite understand the requirements. I don't understand what I'm looking for, from my supplier. And so we drafted this document called How to Find Low Emission Materials for Indoor Air Plus compliance, and that seemed to help a lot of builders and home energy raters. I think there's an image on that in a subsequent slide. But yeah, I think this landscape is changing rapidly, and it's probably going to continue to evolve very quickly, especially as we're, folks are kind of monitoring total VOCs now, through some of these low cost monitors.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about formaldehyde and composite wood. I know this has been, it's an area of concern for homeowners and contractors. We had the lumber liquidator thing and all the other things that kind of brought this to people's attention. What should we be looking for with low formaldehyde products? Yeah,
great question. And composite wood, I think a lot of folks, don't recognize right away how much composite wood is in our homes. There's cabinetry, structural panels, of course, the OSB in our homes, but there's shelving, there's trim, there's doors are oftentimes made of MDF, even stair treads are made of MDF. So there's a lot of these materials in our home. And for a while, the California Air Resources Board, CARB, Phase 2, was the kind of gold standard in the country for low formaldehyde products, and still is. So we would reference CARB Phase 2 as a compliance method for some of those, and there's a number of other ANSI standards for different types of those products, particle board, MDF, et cetera. But what's happened recently, over the last couple of years, is EPA, worked with CARB to develop a national rule, the TSCA Title VI, which is the Toxic Substances Control Act, to really create a national standard for formaldehyde and composite wood products. And that's great for homeowners and consumers. And it actually goes into effect this year, this month. So as of June 1st, all composite wood products that are those hardwood plywoods, MDF, and particle board that are sold or manufactured or even imported into the U.S., they need to be labeled as CARB Phase 2 or TSCA Title VI. So that's a great thing for homeowners. And I think over the next year and a half, we'll be assessing kind of how to make the next step in improving indoor air quality when it comes to formaldehyde and composite wood for the Indoor Air Plus program. So that's still on the horizon.
And you had mentioned earlier the document that we have up now, How to Find Indoor Air Plus Compliant Low Emission Products. You want to just follow up a little on this document?
Sure. Yeah, that's the one I mentioned previously. And, again, it's available on our website. It's on our program documents page where you can find our construction specs and this document, which is kind of an additional resource to help you find those. And we'll be updating this again in the near future as well. But check back 6 months or a year from now, and I'm sure things will continue to evolve.
Yeah, you've evolved quite a bit since the last time I talked about this, Nick. It's great to see, and you're working with other industry partners, and really, and I think that the nicest thing is you keep mentioning how you're working with the builders, and that's vital, because if they don't buy into it and can't find a low emitting product or a good detail on how you want certain things done, it's just not going to happen. So I'm always happy to hear that the builders are also involved with this. Let's talk a little bit more about the commissioning of the home. Let's go to the next slide, John. This is, I believe, going to be on commissioning. Let's talk a little bit about this particular slide here, Nick.
Yeah, commissioning is a funny term. It's one that it resonates a little bit more in the commercial world, but even there, I think it's starting to change where people don't quite understand what it means. There's not a great definition for it. Really what we try, I think what was the original intent of this was to try to, flush out the building as best we can when some of those potentially emitting products are being installed, and after the home is complete, to really try and ventilate the home at the highest rate practical, and then give the rater an opportunity to inspect and double check that there's a good filter in the home. But one of the most important pieces, which we talked about earlier, is that homeowner education piece. And so each and every Indoor airPLUS home should have both a label that goes on the breaker box and a certificate with it as well. Some builders, again, kind of stuff that in a folder with a bunch of other things to give to their home buyer and don't pay it much attention. But I think, builders who are really wise to this will kind of walk through some of those key bullet points about the features of the home that are listed on the certificate, and even maybe a little more in depth about the reasons why they should maintain some of those additional systems, dehumidifiers, a radon system. Don't ever cut into the radon pipe, for example. That should be a number one recommendation that a builder should pass on to the home buyer.
I've noticed in working with some contractors and actually folks we've had on the show, they'll use these as a marketing thing. I mean, you've got the nice label up on whatever, your breaker box or whatever, and then they have a little sign below that kind of explains, why this was a part of their healthier home or their Indoor airPLUS home, and they use it as a way of selling the home.
Absolutely. And people have asked us if we could have Indoor airPLUS plaques, and if we had unlimited budgets, that would be great, but we don't offer Indoor airPLUS plaques. But yeah, some builders do kind of put a little framed certificate together for the homeowner and pass that along as a value add for them. So,
well, we're talking about builders and raters and so forth. If they're interested and they want to learn more, what other additional technical guidance and tools does EPA have available?
Great. So yeah, if you want to learn more about Indoor airPLUS, we'll give you the contact information for our website and our email at the end. But if you have technical inquiries right away, go to the DOE Building America Solutions Center. This is a great resource where we have our program checklist and also some additional guidance and background details about each of those spec items. And the same for the other federal labeling programs for homes, Energy Star, the Water Sense Labeled Homes program, and DOE's Zero Energy Ready Home program. So those resources are all there. The Pacific Northwest National Labs does a great job keeping it up and actually taking additional public input on that as well. So if you have good pictures and images, please feel free to send them in to them.
Well, I'm glad you're working with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then marketing tools as well. There's another section on that Solution Center for kind of sales resources and ways to communicate those kind of building sciencey types of things to the home buyer. And we try to do that as well with some of our literature that partners can access on our website too. So we have a Discover Indoor airPLUS Homes booklet. It's about 30 pages of information about why contaminants are an issue and how Indoor airPLUS helps to address those contaminant issues.
Excellent. And that DOE website is just really getting better every month almost. I'm glad to see you've got your materials on there as well. And then we've got the Indoor Leader Awards here. How about telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for builders and home energy raters who are participating in our program. They're our partners. They're labeling homes or they're verifying the homes that are being sold. And every year we have this opportunity. It's open right now, and it's open till July 9th for any eligible home energy raters and builders. And so it's really featuring about 10 to 12 of our leading partners who are using those marketing resources and doing really great education to the homeowners, promoting the program, using the logos on their website, and kind of going the extra mile to communicate the importance of indoor air quality. And this year we have a couple really exciting new developments with this. We'll be not only giving the award to about 10 or 12 of our partners, but also one Leader of the Year winner in both the builder and rater category. And those are going to be announced at the EBA High Performance Building Summit, which is happening in October in San Diego. So a really exciting event. There's a lot of indoor air quality experts there. They have a great lineup. They just released their educational program. So really good conference, and we'll be again presenting these awards to the winners there.
Well, we'll have to see if we can't follow up on that, Nick. Let's move to the next one, though. You said the program continues to make updates and refinements and spec, and there may be some other changes on the way. Can you tell us a little bit about where the program is headed? And we're not stuck on just stopping the show at 1 o'clock here. And if you have time, we can go over another 5 minutes or so, Nick.
Sure, I'm happy to stick around, and I'll be brief about these. We talked a little bit about some of the potential specification updates that might happen to really kind of help us raise the bar just a little bit further when it comes to indoor air quality, impacts for the homeowner. So some of those things are listed there. Maybe the more low emission materials categories or increased filtration for fresh air coming in. But then we're also considering opening up the program more to mid and high rise. The Energy Star Certified Homes program and the multifamily high rise program are going through an evolution right now, which is an exciting one, where the multifamily program will, instead of just being a high rise, it'll go from low to high rise. And so there'll be some eligibility changes. So we're potentially going to have some eligibility changes of our own in the near future. We're just on the front end of that, and a lot of that's going to be in development over the next 6 months to a year. But we're also working actively, actually, on specifications for an existing home program. When this first was rolled out, 10 years ago, roughly, it was just new homes, but the hope was that this could be applied to existing homes, but it's more challenging, So new homes was tackled first. And now we're at a place where we think we could hopefully apply some of the same building science recommendations and practices for IAQ into the existing homes market, which could have a really great reach for home performance contractors. And yeah, here's some reasons why. There's roughly 11,000 HVAC change out a year. There's millions of homes every year that are upgraded, and oftentimes they don't have any sort of comprehensive plan for indoor air quality and environmental health. So if we can help homeowners kind of create that plan and help home performance contractors, advise them in that plan and making those upgrades, we could see a really big impact. And it could be great for homeowners, but also great for the home performance industry. And we're hearing from, some of those stakeholders in that industry that EPA has great tools already. Why not apply them to a label? We have the Healthy Indoor Environment Protocols, which I think you guys have talked about before on your show,
yes,
that are great recommendations for home energy upgrades that are more specific to health and safety features. So we have some of those the content already, and creating it in a way that we can fit it into a labeling program is the next challenge and exciting development.
Seems like that would be nice too for a homeowner that wants that for themselves, but then also when they sell their home, they want to be able to market it as, a little better than the home next door that you might consider.
Absolutely. And we foresee it, kind of following a similar type of approach, third-party verification, EPA partnerships with home energy evaluators or, IAQ evaluators in the home. And then they can market their participation. We'd have some type of credential for the verifier, we presume, and they help create a scope of work and help usher the home repair process, and then ultimately do kind of a final test out. So all those things are still in the works, and we're trying to gather as much feedback from key stakeholders as we can as we develop that.
I could see people building a business model around that, especially with the existing home. There's such a huge market out there. And I know a lot of the home performance guys are trying to go to a more holistic approach, while we're in doing any kind of upgrades, air sealing, adding insulation, let's also upgrade the mechanical system and get it all done at once. So I can see that being a big nice program for you in the future. Looks like what we've got here are just some ways of people to get more information. If you could just mention for listeners what we've got up on the slide now, Nick.
You bet. EPA.gov/indoor airPLUS. That's our website. And of course, it's great. We take feedback and questions by email. It's indoor_airPLUS@EPA.gov. So that's a great way to get in contact with us. And then you can find us on Facebook and Twitter as well. We use those forums to communicate with partners and kind of give snippets about program updates and great things happening in the IAQ industry.
Nick, before we go, and Cliff, I just wanted to jump in here and make sure, was there anything you wanted to add or ask Cliff or ask Nick?
I just had one, Nick. When you give the label to the contractor to apply to the electrical panel and so on and so forth, is there a specific number on there that prevents someone from just copying the label and putting it on their houses that haven't gone through the program?
Great question. No, there's not a specific ID number for each home, and we actually don't even collect address level information on homes. But the home energy rater and the home energy provider, their oversight provider, are the ones that apply that label to the home, and they're the only ones that can actually access our label stock, the sticker stock itself. Obviously somebody could try to photocopy or do make additional labels, but we don't have the ability to kind of monitor or police that. But I haven't heard of any instances of fraudulence yet, so fingers crossed.
Okay, thanks.
Nick, before we go, is there anything we missed that you'd like to add? And I also just want to thank you so much, and the folks that helped us organize this and get this program put together. It's always great to have folks from the federal government come on the program and talk to us and our listeners. Anything you'd like to add before we go?
Well, I guess for all those listeners out there who are deep into the IAQ industry, we'd be happy to take your comments, thoughts, and feedback on our specifications themselves, especially as we're moving over the next year or so to a version 2 of the program and refining it and adapting it a little bit differently, and even applying it again to existing homes. So we're looking forward to that collaboration and feedback, and please reach out to us if you have questions.
Yeah, when you're doing that existing homes, I'm going to urge, I made an announcement, Jay Stake was the now president of the Indoor Air Quality Association. I'd love to see them working more with you on this next phase, because that's the kind of thing their people do. We go in and try and fix existing homes, and that can be quite a challenge, Nick.
No doubt. Agreed.
Thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it. This is Radio Joe Hughes saying thanks to Nick Hurst for joining us from the EPA's Indoor Environments Division, the Indoor Air Plus Program Manager. And by the way, I've used some of your details in my training classes for years now, and very helpful, especially like the crawl space and things like that. So it's great to have that kind of work available to the public. Also want to mention that next week we'll be taking a little break. Cliff, we're going to take a little break for the holidays, but we'll be back the week after. I think we've got another restoration show lined up. Cliff, is that still on the books?
I think so, yes. Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, correct.
We have 2. One with
Norp, Whitney Wiseman from Norp.
Yep. And then the following week, we were hoping to get the
Australian group, I think.
The Australian group in. The RIA just had a big event in Australia. So, again, thanks to Nick Hurst for joining us today. Of course, to my co-host, the Z-Man, at the controls. John, you got to have faith. Most importantly, our growing group of loyal listeners will be back in 2 weeks with the next live broadcast of IAQ Radio.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reed saying thanks for listening.